Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a room of 100 women. Now realize only 5 of them are doing what it takes to live longer, feel better, and become the best version of themselves. The rest, they're surviving, but not thriving. The question is, which one are you? We live in a world obsessed with quick fixes, diet fads, miracle routines, instant hacks. But real health, real longevity, and real transformation, they require something more rare, something deeper. And that's exactly what we're here to uncover. As Sinek once said, working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. Today, we talk not just about health, but about living with purpose, with power, and with peace. There's a difference between knowing what's good for us and actually doing what's good for us. The world is full of people who are aware of the steps to a healthier life, but awareness isn't what leads to transformation. Action does. Consistent, deliberate, and purposeful action. That's what separates the 5% from the 95%. That's what creates change, not in theory, but in reality. We often talk about wanting to live longer, to feel better, to reduce stress, to find balance. And yet, the path to that kind of life isn't hidden. It's right in front of us. The data is clear, the studies are repeated, the experts have spoken. But information isn't the problem. Integration is, and the truth is, most people won't do it. Not because they can't, but because they don't truly understand what's at stake, or they've been conditioned to settle for survival instead of striving for vitality. The ones who do, those few, have something in common. They understand that health isn't a switch to be flipped when it's convenient. It's a series of choices made daily, often silently, and usually without applause. It's a long game, one that rewards patience, self-respect, and intention. They don't chase trends, they build foundations. They're not waiting for Monday or for motivation to strike. They begin now, because they know every day delayed is a day borrowed from their future well-being. We've been taught to treat health like a problem to be solved, rather than a relationship to be nurtured. That mindset is the first thing these women discard. They don't see food, movement, or rest as a checklist. They see them as conversations with their bodies. And like any good conversation, the key is to listen. To notice how their body feels after a meal, how their mind responds to stress, how energy changes with sleep, with movement, with silence. The women in that 5% aren't superhuman. They aren't better. They've just made a different decision, a decision to take ownership of their time, their mind, their energy. It's not that they never falter. It's that they return. They recommit. They remember why they started. There's a critical misunderstanding about discipline. We think it's about control, about force. But discipline, real discipline, is about love. It's about caring enough for your future self to make decisions your present self might not find easy. It's about refusing to be a passive observer of your life. These women have turned discipline into devotion. And that's not something that happens overnight. It starts with a moment of clarity, a realization that they are the common denominator in every aspect of their life, their relationships, their work, their health, their happiness. If they improve, everything else improves with them. When we look at the lives of those who are thriving, not just functioning but flourishing, we see patterns. They are not magical. They are methodical. They go to sleep on time. They get sunlight in the morning. They move daily. They pause before reacting. They eat foods that nourish them. They say no when it matters. None of these things are revolutionary, but the commitment to doing them consistently is. That's what makes the 5% so rare. Because the rest are waiting for the right time, the right plan, the right partner, the right body, the right mindset. But waiting is a decision too. It's a decision to let time pass while your life stands still. And life will keep moving with or without you. It's also worth saying, this is not about perfection. The healthiest people are not the ones who never eat sugar, or miss a workout, or feel stress. They are the ones who return to center quickly, who have cultivated awareness so deeply that they recognize when they've drifted and gently steer back. That's the work. Not to be flawless, but to be fluent, in the language of your own needs, rhythms, and values. And here's the beauty of it. These 5 habits, the ones only 5% consistently apply, aren't expensive. They don't require elite access. They don't depend on luck, genetics, or privilege. They require one thing: presence. A willingness to stop outsourcing responsibility for your life. A readiness to become your own ally, not your own enemy. Science has validated what wisdom has long known: that the small things done well and done often matter far more than the occasional grand gesture. A consistent bedtime, a few minutes of reflection, a nourishing meal, a deep breath before reacting, a walk in the fresh air. These are not acts of mediocrity, they are acts of mastery. The compound effect of these simple choices shapes not just our health, but our mindset, our relationships, and ultimately, our legacy. It's easy to fall into the trap of someday. Someday I'll prioritize my health. Someday I'll get serious. Someday I'll invest in myself. But someday is a lie. There is only today, only this moment, only this decision. The women in that 5%, they know that. And they don't wait to feel ready. They decide, and readiness follows. That's how momentum works. You don't wait for it. You create it. And the irony: once these habits become embedded, they stop feeling like chores. They become a form of freedom. They remove friction. They simplify choices. They create space for energy, joy, and purpose. That's the reward on the other side of consistency. Not just better health, but a better experience of life. This isn't about shame. It's about possibility. It's about realizing that you can begin again at any time. You can choose to become one of the few. You can choose a life not ruled by fatigue, overwhelm, or regret, but led by clarity, energy, and strength. Because in the end, longevity isn't just about years added to your lifespan. It's about depth added to your days. It's about waking up and feeling alive, not just awake. It's about living in a way that makes the future you proud and the present you peaceful. That's what the 5% have figured out. Not just how to survive, but how to build a life worth waking up for. And that choice? It's not reserved for them. It's available to anyone, to you. Right now, there's a misunderstanding we've inherited, belief that being alone means being lonely. That solitude is something to be avoided. That silence signals emptiness. And so, we run. We fill our calendars, our feeds, our moments with noise, not because we're truly busy, but because stillness is unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things often feel unsafe. But solitude, real solitude, isn't a void, it's a mirror. In that space, when the world grows quiet, when the distractions fade, something honest emerges. You meet yourself without filters. And for many, that's uncomfortable. Because solitude doesn't flatter you. It reflects you. It shows you what's working and what isn't. Where you've grown and where you're stuck. It reveals the parts you've been too busy to notice. That's why it matters. Not as a spiritual idea, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Because if you don't understand yourself, you will build a life based on misunderstanding. If you don't make time to ask hard questions, you will accept easy answers that don't fit. And if you don't create space to listen inward, you will spend your life reacting outward. There is clarity that only comes in silence, wisdom that only surfaces when there's room to breathe, ideas that only arrive when you stop chasing and start observing. In solitude, patterns become visible. You begin to notice the way your energy spikes around certain people and depletes around others. You recognize the habits that serve you and the ones that sabotage you. You hear your own voice, not the echo of someone else's. Most people don't know how to sit in that space. They feel the tension and reach for a screen, a task, a distraction. But those who grow, those who evolve, learn to stay. They learn to lean into the discomfort long enough to find the insight on the other side. That's the difference. Not that they never feel restless, but that they know something valuable is waiting in the quiet, and they're willing to stay long enough to receive it. Solitude isn't isolation. It's connection, just in a different direction. Instead of reaching out, you reach in. And in doing so, you build a relationship with yourself that becomes the foundation for every other relationship in your life. Because if you don't understand your own needs, how can you communicate them? If you don't explore your own thoughts, how can you make aligned decisions? If you don't trust your own voice, how can you lead, love, or live with integrity? There's a certain strength that grows in solitude, a kind of mental muscle, because you're no longer outsourcing validation. You're no longer molding yourself to fit someone else's comfort. You're not looking for direction. You're discovering it. And from that place, your choices become clearer, not easier, but truer. You start to make decisions not based on fear or approval, but on alignment. And alignment is what breeds peace. We've been taught to chase productivity like it's the ultimate goal, to do more, to optimize, to achieve. And yes, there's value in action, in building, in contributing. But if your actions aren't anchored in peace, they become compulsions, not creations. You check the boxes, hit the targets, earn the praise, but feel hollow. Because productivity without peace is performance. It looks impressive, but it doesn't feel fulfilling. True progress isn't just about movement. It's about movement in the right direction. And you can't know that direction without inner calm, without clarity, without pause. Most people keep climbing without asking where the ladder leads. They wake up years later successful by someone else's definition and lost by their own. Peace isn't the absence of activity. It's the presence of purpose. It's knowing why you do what you do. It's having enough stillness inside you that chaos outside doesn't shake you. It's being grounded in something deeper than praise or outcomes. And from that grounding, your actions become powerful. Not because they're louder, but because they're clearer, sharper, more meaningful. The pursuit of peace is not a detour from success. It's the root of it. When your mind is clear, your energy isn't wasted on worry or confusion. When your heart is calm, your relationships thrive. When your spirit is centered, your work becomes an expression, not a burden. Everything improves, not because you're doing more, but because you're doing what matters. The women who prioritize peace aren't passive. They're precise. They don't hustle harder. They act from clarity. They don't please everyone. They honor alignment. They don't wait for peace to find them. They create it. Through boundaries, through reflection, through intentional choices. They've learned that saying yes to everything is a form of self-abandonment. That silence is not weakness but wisdom. That the most powerful decisions often come from the quietest moments. The irony is that we often think of peace and solitude as soft qualities, gentle, passive, even indulgent. But it takes courage to be still. It takes strength to listen when the noise fades. It takes discipline to sit with uncertainty rather than escape it. And it takes deep self-trust to believe that the most important work you'll ever do happens in moments no one else sees. When you practice solitude and cultivate peace, you become unshakable, not because life stops being hard, but because you stop being scattered. You carry your center with you. And in a world that constantly pulls your attention in 100 directions, that kind of presence is revolutionary. So the next time you're tempted to fill the silence, pause. The next time you feel the urge to do more without knowing why, pause. The next time you confuse activity for effectiveness, pause. Because in that pause is power. In that stillness is strength. And in that solitude is the beginning of something extraordinary yourself. There is a lie we've been told, and it's subtle enough that most people believe it without question. The lie is that progress is something we can measure solely in output. That the more we produce, the more we matter. That hustle is the currency of success and rest is a reward for the weak. So we chase tasks, to-do lists, filled calendars. We run faster, we stretch thinner, we convince ourselves that business means purpose. But something doesn't feel right. Because even when we hit the goals, even when we get the promotion, even when the inbox is zero and the hours are long, there's a restlessness we can't name, a quiet ache behind the achievements. Not because the work isn't meaningful, but because the foundation is missing. We've confused noise for momentum. We've mistaken movement for direction. Real progress, the kind that lasts, the kind that fulfills, is born from a different place. Not from stress, not from frenzy, but from peace. And peace isn't passive. Peace is power refined. It's the discipline to slow down in a world that worships speed. It's the clarity to say no to what's urgent in order to say yes to what's important. It's the self-trust to follow a pace that honors your energy, not just your expectations. People rarely talk about peace as a strategy, but it is. It's the foundation for clear decisions, steady focus, and meaningful work. When you operate from peace, you're not reacting, you're responding. You're not caught in every wave of emotion or external pressure. You're anchored. And from that place, your work isn't just more productive, it's more purposeful. It's easy to look at someone who's calm in the storm and think they're unaffected. But often, those are the ones who've built something within. They've learned that peace isn't what happens when life is easy. It's what you create when life is chaotic. It's the mindset that keeps your energy directed, your values clear, your actions aligned. Nowhere is this more important than in how we treat our minds and bodies. Somewhere along the way, we started treating them like separate systems. We talk about mental health like it's one conversation and physical health like it's another. But they are the same conversation, spoken through different languages. One affects the other every single day. Stress is not just a feeling, it's a physiological event. What you think your body experiences. What you eat, your brain interprets. The boundaries you fail to set with people don't just cost you time, they cost you energy, clarity, immunity. Emotional exhaustion wears down the body just as surely as physical overwork clouds the mind. You cannot be mentally strong and physically depleted. You cannot be physically vibrant and emotionally numbed. The two are married, whether we acknowledge it or not. And the people who thrive, the ones who seem to have a radiance, a resilience, a spark, they don't separate the two. They nurture both. They know that what heals the mind heals the body, and vice versa. This doesn't mean they're perfect. It means they're integrated. They don't shame themselves for needing rest. They don't pretend stress is just something to push through. They listen. They respond. They see fatigue not as a flaw, but as feedback. They know that burnout isn't a badge of honor. It's a sign of disconnection. The strongest people don't power through blindly. They pause. They evaluate. They adjust. They treat their mind like it matters because it does. They treat their body like it's sacred because it is. And when things feel off, they don't ignore it. They investigate. They bring awareness instead of avoidance. We've been conditioned to prioritize what can be seen, measured, and praised. But the most important work we do is often invisible. Rewiring the way we talk to ourselves. Choosing nourishing food when comfort food tempts us. Getting up to move when the easier choice is to sit. Saying no to something draining. Creating a boundary that preserves energy. These are not small acts. These are foundational acts. And the people who do them consistently build a life not just of health, but of wholeness. You can't meditate your way out of a poor diet. You can't eat your way out of chronic anxiety. The answer is never in one direction. It's in harmony. It's in treating your entire system, mind, body, and spirit, as interconnected. Because it always has been. When you start treating your health this way, everything else becomes clearer. Your decisions sharpen. Your focus deepens. Your relationships become more authentic. Because you're no longer managing symptoms, you're creating alignment. That's what most people miss. They try to fix pieces instead of healing the whole. They work out but never process their stress. They journal but ignore the body's signals. They push through fatigue instead of honoring it. But the women who last, the ones who glow from within, they've learned that the most powerful strategy is integration. It takes intention. It takes awareness. It takes stepping back from the noise long enough to ask, is how I'm living, thinking, and treating myself aligned with how I want to feel? That question alone can change your life, because most people don't ask it. They chase health like it's a destination. But the real journey isn't about fixing. It's about becoming. Becoming someone who protects their peace, guards their energy, nourishes their mind, and honors their body. There's a grace that comes with this kind of living. You stop needing to prove anything. You stop comparing your pace to others. You realize that true success isn't how much you achieve, but how well you align, how whole you feel, how clear you are when the world isn't. That's not something you get from a routine. That's something you cultivate by living in truth. So when the world pulls you in every direction, when the pressure builds, when the mind spirals and the body tenses, remember the connection. Your peace is your power. Your body is your compass. Your mind is your guide. And when you treat them like partners, not projects, you step into a rhythm that's not just sustainable, it's transformational. When people talk about growth, they often picture a ladder, something you climb, a new course, a new title, a new skill, a new role, always upward, always forward. The assumption is that growth comes from addition, adding knowledge, adding habits, adding pressure. But real growth doesn't always look like addition. Sometimes, it looks like subtraction, not adding more, but letting go of what no longer fits, shedding what you were taught so you can discover what you actually believe. We're not blank slates. From the moment we're born, we're absorbing lessons, expectations, assumptions about what success means, what strength looks like, how women should behave, how we're allowed to feel. And we carry these lessons without ever questioning them. They become the silent operating systems behind our choices. The jobs we accept, the relationships we tolerate, the stories we tell ourselves about what we're capable of. Growth begins when we stop accepting those defaults. When we start asking, who taught me this? Why do I believe this? Does it actually serve me? Or is it just familiar? That's the real work. It's not glamorous. It doesn't look impressive on a resume, but it's the kind of work that changes lives. Because when you unlearn the idea that your worth is tied to productivity, you finally rest without guilt. When you unlearn the belief that you must be liked to be safe, you start setting boundaries. When you unlearn the idea that vulnerability is weakness, you begin to connect deeply. Letting go is not giving up. It's growing up. It's recognizing that you've outgrown patterns that once protected you, that the armor you wore in your past is now weighing you down, that some beliefs were handed to you, not chosen by you. And now, it's time to choose. It's time to ask what's true for you, not what's expected of you. This process isn't linear. It doesn't happen in a weekend seminar or a morning routine. It happens in moments, in conversations that trigger old wounds, in choices that feel unfamiliar because they're healthy, in quiet reflections where you realize the voice in your head isn't your own. It's someone else's criticism you've carried for years. And the moment you recognize it, you have power. Because awareness is the beginning of freedom. Freedom doesn't always feel good at first. Sometimes it feels like confusion, like uncertainty, like standing in the middle of who you were and who you're becoming. But that discomfort is sacred. It means you're shifting. It means something is moving. It means you're not settling for a life that makes sense on the outside, but feels off on the inside. To support that kind of growth, environment matters. You can't heal in the same place you were hurt. You can't evolve in a space that only ever saw the old version of you. People, places, routines, they hold energy. And sometimes that energy keeps you small, not because they intend harm, but because they're used to who you used to be. That's why change is more than personal. It's relational. When you start growing, some people will cheer you on. Others will question it. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because your growth confronts their comfort. And that's okay. It's not your job to shrink to fit someone else's idea of who you are. It's your responsibility to honor the evolution you're stepping into. This may mean creating space, not to punish, but to protect. Protect your peace. Protect your momentum. Protect the new patterns that are still tender. Sometimes, growth looks like unfollowing accounts that make you doubt yourself. Like taking a different route to work so your thoughts are less cluttered. Like spending time with people who remind you of what's possible, not just what's familiar. We underestimate how much our environment influences us. We think willpower is enough. That if we just try harder, we can thrive anywhere. But even the most resilient seed can't bloom in poisoned soil. You need light. You need nourishment. You need space. And sometimes, that means stepping away from the noise long enough to hear yourself again. This isn't about running from challenges. It's about creating a context where growth isn't constantly met with resistance, where you don't have to explain your worth, where you can breathe without apologizing, because when your environment supports your growth, you begin to rise, not out of pressure, but out of possibility. And when you combine the courage to unlearn with the wisdom to choose your environment, something powerful happens. You stop performing and start becoming. You start making choices based on alignment, not approval. You stop fearing change and start trusting it. And that trust becomes a compass. One that doesn't point you to what's easy, but to what's true. In this space, growth is no longer a goal. It's a way of being. It's in how you speak to yourself, in how you hold boundaries without guilt, in how you move through the world, not to prove, but to express. And suddenly, the things you once chased begin to arrive, not because you forced them, but because you became someone who could receive them. There's an inner voice we're all born with, not the one that echoes other people's opinions or echoes fear, not the one shaped by rules, rewards, or repetition. It's quieter than that. It doesn't shout or demand. It simply knows. And for many women, that knowing has always been there, guiding in subtle ways, a gut feeling, a nudge, an unexplainable certainty. That's intuition, not as a mystery, but as a form of wisdom. The challenge isn't that women lack intuition. It's that they've been conditioned to doubt it. From an early age, logic is valued over feeling, structure over sensitivity, evidence over instinct. And so, the message gets internalized. If you can't prove it, you can't trust it. If you can't explain it, you should ignore it. But instinct isn't something meant to be justified. It's meant to be honored. Intuition isn't irrational. It's pre-rational. It's faster than thought. It's your body, your nervous system, your experience, and your pattern recognition speaking before your mind catches up. When a woman feels something's off in a meeting, when she senses that a relationship isn't safe, when she hesitates on a yes she can't quite explain, it's not drama. It's data. The problem is that we don't teach women to listen to that data. We teach them to override it, to be agreeable, to second guess, to defer to others, to prioritize harmony over inner truth. And over time, intuition gets buried under layers of social conditioning, not because it fades, but because it gets drowned out by the noise of expectations. Reclaiming intuition doesn't mean abandoning logic. It means integrating both. It means making decisions not just with your head, but with your whole self. And that starts with presence. You can't access inner knowing if you're always externally focused. If your attention is scattered, your signals become hard to read. But the more you slow down, the clearer it becomes. A tension in the gut, a calm certainty in the chest, a pull you can't explain but can't ignore. Trusting intuition is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. At first, it may feel risky, because intuition often leads in directions that defy convention. It nudges you to leave a job that looks good on paper, but feels empty. It guides you toward a project that excites you but doesn't guarantee praise. It tells you to rest when everyone else is sprinting, and that can be terrifying in a world that rewards conformity. But the truth is, the most powerful leaders aren't the ones who always have the answer. They're the ones who are brave enough to follow their knowing, even when it doesn't make sense to others. They've learned that the wisdom inside them isn't a liability, it's a compass. And when they follow it, they don't just succeed, they inspire, because their actions come from alignment, not approval. Tuning into intuition also helps with discernment. Not every opportunity is for you. Not every voice deserves equal weight. Not every path is worth pursuing. The more you trust your inner signals, the less energy you waste on things that don't serve you. You begin to filter your life based on resonance, not noise. And that's not just empowering, it's efficient. Still, the road to this kind of self-trust isn't smooth. Growth never is. One of the most damaging myths is that the path of personal development is linear, that it should feel like constant upward movement. That once you level up, you never go back. But the truth is, progress is rarely clean. It's cyclical, layered, messy. And that's not a flaw, it's a feature. Setbacks don't mean you're broken. They mean you're being challenged in the places you're still building, Growth will always ask you to revisit old patterns, not to punish you, but to strengthen your response. When you find yourself triggered by something you thought you'd healed, that's not regression. That's integration. It's your system asking, can we respond differently this time? Most people judge themselves too quickly. They take a bad day as evidence that they haven't changed. They let one moment of doubt erase months of progress. But that's like blaming the gym for muscle soreness. The presence of challenge doesn't mean the absence of growth. It means the work is real. It means you're engaging with life instead of avoiding it. Resilience isn't built in your victories. It's built in your returns, in the way you show up after falling, in the way you speak to yourself in the low moments, in your ability to continue, not because it's easy, but because it's aligned. That's where character is forged, not in perfection, but in persistence. There's a rhythm to self-growth that requires grace. Grace for the days you feel behind. Grace for the triggers that still get to you. Grace for the moments when clarity feels far away. Because underneath all of it, you're still becoming. You're shedding. You're rewiring. You're unlearning and relearning at the same time. And that is courageous work. When you combine that grace with intuition, something powerful emerges. You stop treating growth like a destination and start living it as a way of being. You trust the process even when it's quiet. You move with awareness even when you're uncertain. And over time, that trust compounds. Your confidence becomes internal. Your clarity becomes embodied. You begin to show up not as someone who needs to prove, but as someone who already knows. The journey isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you were before the world taught you to doubt, before fear told you to shrink, before performance replaced presence. You don't need to be more. You need to be more you. And that version of you, clear, calm, connected, is already within. You see, longevity isn't just about adding years to your life. It's about adding life to your years. Simon Sinek reminds us that purpose isn't found in noise. It's found in silence, in solitude. It is in those quiet moments we ask the boldest questions. Who am I becoming? What do I truly want? So if you're ready to live like the top 5%, start with you. Start with solitude, build your health like a temple, and let your journey of self-growth become the legacy you leave behind. Because the truth is simply, the strongest, happiest, longest living women are not born. They are built.